Welcome into the Husker247 Podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruns, Brian Christopherson, here on a bit of a dreary Wednesday morning. We're going to talk some Nebraska football. John Butler, Deshon Singleton, Javin Wright, Elijah Judy all met with the media on Tuesday. Nebraska is now, I believe, 5 practices in. Are they 5 practices in, Bruns? Is that where we're at?
Five.
Yeah. They're 1/3 of the way through spring football. Think about it like that. So 5 practices in, and there's plenty to discuss. So we're gonna jump into it. BC, you were in the room yesterday. What did John Butler have to talk about as it relates to his first spring as Nebraska's defensive coordinator? And based on what we saw in the 30 minutes of opening practice the other day, he is a very animated, very vocal coach out there.
Yeah, I was in the room when it happened. That's Hamilton, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Good show. It's coming to Omaha. You should go see it.
Is it? You know what? What stood out first off is there's going to be not a lot of naming of names this spring, and there was some efforts made to get him to talk maybe about Deshon McCullough, Marquez Watson Trent. I just don't think they're going to really bite on that. They're going to let it play out. But he stressed things you would expect from a coach, and kind of had some bullet points of it's effort, execution, and finishing was the thing he really honed in on. And they're charting obviously how guys are whether they're finishing on pass breakups, on their pass rush, and it's being marked down, and guys are getting rewarded for it if they do it well, and guys know where they stand if they have to improve. So nothing surprising on that front. I thought the part about sort of his relationship with Phil Snow, people are interested in that. And, he said, I think what you'd expect there too, like you have a coach around you who's done this for as many decades as Phil Snow has. You'd be basically a fool not to listen to him and learn some things from him along the way. And so he sounds like he likes the staff, like he thinks the newer guys that have joined it are hungry. We've kind of got that theme when you talk to, Phil Simpson, Terry Braden. I think there is just an eagerness, like it's a big job for them right now to show what they can do. And so you kind of have this deal where players are trying to show themselves, but coaches want to prove it too. And so you hope that's the right cocktail.
With the Butler Phil Snow thing, Bruns, what did we kind of make of it? I guess, do you remember sort of how you felt about it when it was announced that Phil Snow was going to be on the staff? And then as they've talked through it, what do things seem like they look like now as we sit here in the spring?
Yeah, I guess when it was announced, I guess I didn't see it as like needing a crutch for John Butler. Like I think there's one way to look at it of like, okay, you're bringing in this longtime rule guy because you've got what is essentially a first-time coordinator. I mean, I know John Butler's been a coordinator elsewhere. I think there's benefits to John Butler for Phil Snow being there, and I don't think it's going to be, I don't think it's like co-coordinator situation. Like
we're looking over your shoulder kind of thing,
right? Like, and you have to remember, John Butler was around last year when Phil Snow came in the bye week in November and was kind of hanging around the facility too. Like, it's not like they are unknown to one another. The other thing that I think is beneficial, and during the open practice period last week, we saw this where Phil Snow was essentially working during the individual periods with all of the young defensive backs, and the Caden Vermasses and the Bryson Webbers and the guys that are enrolled early, or Evan Taylor, another one
coming back from
a guy that I kind of forgotten about until he was running around out there in a green jersey. But kind of getting those guys up to speed, and then he was helping with special teams. I mean, I think it's just a valuable guy to have around. I'm sure that when there's game planning conversations going on once we get into the season, I'm sure he's going to have a voice in that room. But it's going to be John Butler's defense. Like, I'm sure that I'm sure of that. But I think having another person around who doesn't have to go out and recruit, is just around and can kind of just coach. I mean, I think that's the attractiveness to Phil Snow and why he's there. I mean, if Matt Rule wanted him to be the defensive coordinator, he would have been the defensive coordinator when Matt Rule came to Nebraska. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I think especially as you get into the 105, this is the last thing I'll say on it. When you get into the 105, you're going to need to make sure that you're bringing that next level of guy, the redshirt freshman, the true freshman. They need to be ready to go more quickly. And I think having somebody with Phil Snow's experience, I think that's the benefit there.
Yeah, as it was described to me, a lot of Phil Snow's focus is going to be on the guys who aren't currently on the 2 deep to get them to the position that, should they be needed on the 2 deep, they can slide in seamlessly. And so, he's working on technique and things of that nature with a lot of those younger guys, especially in the defensive backfield. I know that Matt Rule thinks really highly of his teaching and his development ability there. BT, do you have any thoughts on the Phil Snow, John Butler dynamic?
I think Bruns laid it out well. I don't think any of us saw him as like a crutch for Butler. And I think, honestly, Phil Snow, from the way he's talked to the media, is doing exactly what he wants to do at this point in his life after a long coaching career. Like he mentioned when he spoke a couple of weeks ago, maybe he could have been the DC back when this first started in Lincoln, but he didn't want that at that point. But now we're in an era where, and this is where I think Rule can get, everybody's going to try to get this advantage, but I think Rule and Nebraska have the potential to grab it, of where you can have more staffers on the field. And if you have the right kind of guys who can give teaching, like we were talking about with Phil Snow and the guys who aren't on the 2 deep, that can be really big for development and keeping guys who are maybe lower down in the program engaged. And so I think it works pretty well. Like, and you could go to the other side of the rule where you can pick whatever 10 staffers you want to go recruit. And then like Dana Holgerson can just focus on being an OC, and he didn't have to go out on the road in January. So there's like rules like that with the staff that I think the head coach sees that can be very valuable for Nebraska if put to the right use.
Let's jump around here to the players at this point in time that spoke. Again, it was Wright, Singleton, and Judy. BC, who do you want to start with? Who's the most interesting of the three for you?
They were in their own way. I think Javin Wright just has such a unique story. The fact that he's a 7th-year Husker and all the obstacles he's been through. And I thought he did pretty well last season for a guy who really didn't practice, like where you're just going through walkthroughs, and he actually ended up playing in 9 games and had 34 tackles, and he had 8 in the Pinstripe Bowl. So he was kind of finishing on a high note. I mean, the big news is that he's back practicing again. So what can he do with a full offseason, hopefully of good health and that training? He feels like he can play all the spots, whether it be the jack position or any of the backer spots. So he's a versatile guy for you. And, John Butler equated him and Singleton returning to being like when he was in the NFL and you had a free agent who you didn't want to go out the door, and they ended up coming back to you, and you were very relieved about it. So I think that this staff's pretty excited to have him back. And I think Javin, I just like his positivity. Like, he has a joy for football and practice, like some guys wouldn't have, because when it's taken away from you, you see how much you miss it.
Yeah, he never really got to find his footing last season. Brooks, what were you about to say?
Well, I wrote about linebackers over the weekend. Like, what do you guys make of that group? Because it's, Wright's a big piece of that. Like, I was thinking about it as I was writing things. Like, that linebacker group looks a heck of a lot different if he's not back. Like, that was like a really nice, like almost like a portal ad in some ways, that he got that 7th year, assuming that, he's healthy and can do everything that he needs to. But like, that position group is kind of fascinating to me because of the guys that left and the number of contributors that left. And I mean, Wright's got to have a good year, I think, to make that group function.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it feels like there's a really clear delineation between your top group of three and then everything else that falls behind it, right? Like you've got some intriguing young guys, but I wouldn't say that they have a deep linebacker room with experience or people that you'd be excited about playing against Cincinnati at the beginning of the year. Is that fair?
And yeah, I think that's fair. There's a drop off until proven otherwise. I mean, there's reason to be excited about Vincent Shavers. Obviously, we don't know a lot about Marquise Watson-Trent other than he has like a great resume at another level and wants to prove it here. So he's got that experience. I think with Javin Wright too, you think back to 2 years ago, that was the 1 year where he was kind of healthy. It felt like, and he had pretty good numbers, like more than 50
plays.
Yeah, he did. And he had a couple, I always talk about Willis McGahee having those almost plays last year. Javin had like 2 or 3 of those that season, in addition to some of the playmaking ones that actually ended up on the stat sheet. And so that's where I guess your hope is that when he had a full year of practice and where it looked kind of normal, he was pretty good, but there could be another level to it. So we'll see. But I think you guys are right. Wright has to hit, for that second level to hit, because he's so versatile and will do a lot of things for him.
Well, just to name names going through that room. So you have Watson-Trent, you have Shavers, you have Wright. Those 3 were the first 3 that I was talking about. And then who would you say the next guy up is? Because you drop all the way down to where they're going to be building up a Christian Jones and a Dawson Merritt over time, but you're not expecting them to say step in against Cincinnati. Who's fourth, I guess, if you would?
Well, I mean, you get into that group of guys that have been around but not really done much yet, like Dylan Rogers.
Yeah, like Dylan Rogers is the first name that came to mind to me.
Gage Stinger is another one that
moved down from safety.
I think Bauer's like the guy no one talks about, but is actually like in the convo too. Jacob Bauer. Like at the bowl game, he was like one of the main guys. He just comes up a lot. Like if you like, people will throw his name into it. I'm not saying he's fourth, but I would count him as much in that category as anybody.
It's interesting though. I mean, like, it's not all that different of a spot. Sorry to like send this into linebacker talk, but it's not all that different of a place than where they were last year, right? Like you had Bayer, you had Wright, you had Bullock. I mean, that was kind of I guess Wright was kind of there was some iffiness about his availability. You were hoping
Thompson
was going to be counted. You had Thompson, but there was a little bit more depth there. But it was kind of the same way where it's like you felt good about like 2 or 3, and then it's like, can you get to 4? Like four feels like a really solid footing there. And I don't even know that Nebraska got to 4 last year. Like I felt like there was enough of a noticeable drop off into that second group at times in that middle linebacker group.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a noticeable drop off if John Bullock wasn't on the field. I think that's right. So part of it for me is that, yes, it does feel similar to last year, but then last year played out John Bullock. If Ty Robinson was one in terms of just absolutely disruptive monster senior season, how many times were we watching games last year? Nebraska's on defense and John Bullock's just in the middle of the action. Like, I think he's going to be a lot tougher to just replace with one guy stepping into a role. And I know that Watson-Trent had a great run at, I think, Georgia Southern, but what John Bullock did for Nebraska last year was huge. I mean, he was Johnny on the spot a lot.
Yeah. Did you guys mention Stanger? I mean, I guess like a wild card like him.
Yep.
Yeah, and that Roger Gradney moved down there and then has the injury. That's unfortunate because I was really interested in him just by his measurables coming out of high school. So hopefully at some point you get to see what that looks like. But I am curious, like with all those DBs, like especially since there's not a lot of information flowing out right now, if there's a couple guys who are movable, sort of like Gradney, that could be interesting by the time we get to August. That's something I guess to just keep an eye on.
He spoke yesterday. Did Deshon Singleton clarify what his role looks like? I mean, Matt Rule kind of hinted that he could move into a second level, but perhaps he plays more of what Gifford did last year, where he's in that kind of rover spot of bouncing between second and third level, 2.5, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of took it as that. Like initially he kind of was hesitant about, like, someone asked specifically about him playing closer to the line of scrimmage, and he kind of did one of those Midwestern no, yeah type of answers, like at first he said no, but said there was going to be some stuff, where he could even blitz and things of that nature. So I do see him maybe more Gifford like, but it hasn't been exactly defined what it is, but I know it's appealing to him, just being a versatile piece. And my takeaway from Singleton was I think he just has a lot of trust in John Butler, and that's a good sign, obviously, because he was coached by him specifically. And it seemed like, that was part of the appeal in coming back. He didn't wait a long time. Like that whole thing was very strange. Like at the end of the year, he thought his Husker career was done. Then there's the court ruling or whatever, which the NCAA had to respond to. And with a month, he talked it over with his family. He's like, let's do this. That's something in this era of college sports that happens where a guy would return. He can get some monetary benefit from still playing at Nebraska while bettering his game that we wouldn't have seen 5 or 10 years ago. So there are these different aspects of college sports where sometimes it works in kind of a favorable way too.
Singleton had a rough year last year, particularly against play action. He struggled in that regard, but he made one of the better plays of their season early on with that stop in the goal line area against Rutgers, coming across the backside of the formation, snuffed the play out, set up the 4th and short. He's a guy that I'm intrigued by, but at the same time, and this is a much larger conversation to have, I do wonder how many of these veterans are going to come back and you just assume they're going to be unquestioned starters, but they might lose playing time to some of the younger guys behind them. Like I think we might see some people's playing time that you expect them, like, oh, he's a senior, he should be up there. Some of these guys, there's some players in the defensive backfield that aren't going to be waiting, I think, too much longer. So I don't know that seniority is going to be the way that things go in 2025. Let's finish with Elijah Jeudy. Brunts, did you familiarize yourself with what Elijah Jeudy had to say yesterday? Can you recap it for us?
Yeah, no, he said multiple times that he had kind of at least wrestled with the decision, or at least had thoughts that he might be done with football. Like he'd said that he was, trying to figure out if he wanted to come back for another year. He said, if he was done at Nebraska, if he was done with football altogether. He ended up obviously making the decision to come back, but he kind of threw in, he was 312 pounds when he came to Nebraska from Texas A&M, dropped all the way down to 270, back up to 298, I think he said was where he was at yesterday. And so what can he be? I mean, last year they said he was kind of the X factor in that group of like, what that defensive line could potentially be would, be somewhat determined by whether or not he was ready to make the leap. He played more in the rotation. I don't know if he necessarily made the leap, but I mean, he's got to be a guy that in that rotation can give you 20, 30 snaps a game now. And, he was saying that he has more confidence playing the run as well as rushing the passer at the weight that he's at. So we'll see. He's also the veteran guy in that group. I mean, Nash and Ty are gone. Jamari Butler's gone. You just look at the depth chart there, potential depth chart, because we're not talking depth charts in spring. There's not a lot of veteran guys that have been around the block at Nebraska. So he's got to lead a little bit, and we'll see how that goes. But, he's when you kind of start going down the list of guys that have to stand up and be counted this year on that defense, I think he's kind of towards the top of the list, given his experience and just being around on the one breath, when you say, at defensive back, there's a pretty good chance that, you could have younger guys stepping up and taking jobs along the defensive line. You have to have a veteran like Elijah Jeudy be part of what Nebraska is doing on defense this year. There's no way around that.
He's also he's a dad now. So he was wrestling with the decision of how best to support a family. And it's it's always fascinating when that happens with some of these college guys. And at least now in NIL world, you can continue to play football and support your family in college a little bit easier, certainly, than in previous eras. Let's take a quick time out. When we come back, we're going to discuss Nebraska's 2025 schedule. We're going to run through this a few times, I'm sure, in the offseason. We're going to put on the record what we think Nebraska's 2025 record will be for the first time this year. Okay, I promise predictions. Brunt he didn't seem like he's excited about that. And maybe he doesn't want to be beholden to his April 2nd Nebraska football prediction, but that's what we're doing on Husker247 today. So here we are. Nebraska gets Cincinnati on this is a Thursday night, right? On a Thursday night in, I almost said Kauffman Stadium, in Arrowhead Stadium down in Kansas City. We haven't really talked much about this. Kind of interesting game to start things off. Does Nebraska start 1-0 in year 3 under Matt Rule? Michael Brunts, you get the honors.
We're going game by game on this?
We're going game by game.
Yeah, they do. I think they win that one.
Yeah, I think they'll win that game. Yeah, it'll be 80% Husker fans, kind of a home game. Could be a tough game, but I'd say they'll win by a score.
I gave real consideration to putting a loss here. Nebraska hasn't won these type of games often. Have not beaten a Power 4 opponent to start the season in their previous 5 attempts now at this point. Not that has anything to do with this current team, but it's out there. So I think this is going to be a tough game. But I'll go ahead. I'll join you guys. Nebraska 1-0. Start things off. We can do the next two, I think, relatively quickly. Akron, Houston Baptist. I'm going to go ahead and say Nebraska wins both of those games to get to 3-0 in the non-con. What says you, Michael Brunts?
Yes, Houston Christian. Not you're conflating your
confusing
your Texas
my Houston
Christian schools.
Yep. Well,
Yeah,
Dan Hefner's not coming out of that tunnel.
Apologies to Houston
Dan
Lutheran.
Hefner, is that right?
it's Houston Christian. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I was making sure I was getting my Dallas Baptist baseball coach correct. It's Dan Hefner.
It's Dallas Baptist, right? Is
Yes.
Dallas Baptist? They're good at baseball.
I
basically just took large Texas City with school that I know of in the NCAA regional and combined them. Whatever.
No, am I imagining this, or
That
did
looks
Dallas
great for me.
Baptist almost make the CWS, or did they? Is that
They were in the super regional at
Okay.
least once.
okay? But they're not playing Nebraska on September 13th in
No.
football, I guess. So I'll say even though it's Houston Christian and they're guys who play football, I say Nebraska wins that game and they're 3-0.
All right, Nebraska's 3-0. They'll be
Night
playing
Ranger.
Houston Christian, not
Night
Houston
Rangers.
Baptist. We don't even know if Houston Baptist exists. School
Sister
that I just
Christian.
made up. So, yes,
Sister Christian.
taking
Night
Nebraska over Sister Christian as well. So, all right, this game, the Big Ten
this game.
opener this year. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Nebraska gets Michigan on September 20th. Michigan finished their season famously with the upset of Ohio State. They played in some bowl game. I don't know whether they won or lost. They played in Florida, I'm pretty sure.
They won.
Or did they go down to
They
they go
beat
to the Music
Alabama.
City Bowl? Maybe they were in the Music City. All right. Well, there you go. So they finished their season with wins over Ohio State and Alabama. They have a lot of off-season momentum. NIL spent a ton of money on the quarterback who may or may not be the starting quarterback for that game. Nebraska, Michigan. BC.
I'll pick Michigan for now. That could be one that is subject to change. I like the fact that Nebraska gets them earlier in the year, actually, as they're developing their quarterback. And by the way, we're doing this because there was an over-under thing by CBS's Tom Fornelli that kind of got us thinking about the 7.5 number. So that's on my mind too. But I'll pick Michigan for now. But we're gonna do this a few times. You said leading up to the season, so I could waffle.
He's already talking about waffling. All right, I'll go ahead and go. I'm going to take Nebraska to win, to go 4-0. Nebraska's 4-0. Spirits are high around Lincoln, and spirits are being consumed. Bruns.
I will reserve my waffling for this game. I'll start with Michigan. This is going to be a bit of the first
An omelet.
test.
You're flipping it a few times.
Yeah, I'm kind of shaking it in the pan a little bit. I think I don't know. That's going to be a tough test for Nebraska's defensive line. We'll see how that's going to be the chin strap game. So I will go initially with Michigan, and also I got to be careful here because I don't want to get Nebraska off to like a 7-0 start, and we're staring down the barrel of that right now. So I'll go Michigan in that one.
Well, now that they have either defeated or lost to Michigan, homecoming game, Michigan State in Memorial Stadium. We haven't seen Michigan State in Lincoln in a while. I think the snow game 2018 is the last time they were in Lincoln. Yep. Does that sound about right? So it's been a while. Michigan State is back. They no longer have any of their previous couple coaches. They have Jonathan Smith. He was at Oregon State. I don't know how they did last year off the top of my head. I'm going to go ahead and take Michigan State and their quarterback that everybody likes to upset Nebraska. I guess upset Nebraska on homecoming day. So first loss of the season to Michigan State.
I'll go Nebraska in that one. That's where I was a little concerned that I was going to get over my skis a bit. They were 5-7 last year. So there's that. But I think Nebraska gets it done against Michigan State. And especially that's coming off of a bye for Nebraska. So you've got that working in your favor as well.
PC?
How many waffles are you allowed, by the way? It's like a question I asked on the golf course, like how many breakfast balls do you get?
You can have as many waffles as you want because you may not know whether you're going to waffle until you get into the next situation. So
I'm not going to waffle on this one. I say Nebraska wins. As far as I know, Michigan State doesn't have Connor Cook walking through that door, completing third down passes. Is one of your favorite Husker games of all time, by the way, 2012 in East Lansing? I mean, that was just like fun, like the bizarre, strange.
It's an all-timer for me, down to the split-second decision to not allow myself to get run over by Jamal Turner on that touchdown. But everything about that day was incredible. It started with a life lesson of how much one should consume when they're on the road covering a football game the next day. I learned that hangovers are rough for the press box, but I also learned that I was nowhere near the worst in shape amongst the Nebraska media in that press box either. So a lot happened on that trip. It was a hell of a game. I mean, you had the pick six. It was maybe the best Taylor Martinez game to sum up his career that's ever existed.
Yeah, it's a Taylor Martinez career in 60 minutes right there. That's what's beautiful about it.
Truly incredible.
Including when he almost picked up his own fumble and almost went 70 yards for a touchdown. That would have been the topper. But
let's do a podcast this summer just going back through that game. I want to talk about that game. I absolutely want to talk about that game. So we're going to table that. All right, Nebraska goes back on the road. They head out to Maryland, where they will take on Mike Loxley's team and whoever they have as their new athletic director. Nebraska, Maryland in College Park. I'm going to say win. Nebraska 5. We're all 4-1. We got there differently, but I'm going to say Nebraska wins. They're 5-1.
I'll go win there. I think it'll be a close game. I think it'll be a stupid game because it just feels like it's setting up for like a really kind of dumb finish or something like that. But I think Nebraska gets out of that one.
PC?
Yeah, I have a win. What was it, 2018 when they went there last? We were
2019.
Yeah,
2019 we went out there. Found a nice soul food place.
Yeah, it was nice.
In the city.
Interviewing a young Ramir Johnson in the tent, like after his first carries. Yeah.
You guys
Well,
got
half
in
the
that game.
half the team got sick. They used their like 7th kicker of the year in that game. What a season. And we didn't even know what was in store for us for 2019 Nebraska, Iowa. All right, Brunts, you said win. BC said win. I said win. So everyone's at 5-1. Nebraska heads to what has been a house of horrors.
Yes.
In the Twin Cities. They're going to Minnesota, and I say the horrors continue. Nebraska loses. It's going to be stupid. You're going to hate yourself. You're going to hate the team. That's the type of game that it is. Nebraska loses at Minnesota, 5-2.
It's going to be 21-17. Like, that's the score. That's what it's going to be.
I think you're giving them too much credit. I think it's going to be 17-13.
Yeah. I'm leaving open the possibility of a defensive or special team score.
I was including it.
Okay. My apologies. But yeah, I think, I don't know. Nothing good ever happens in TCF Bank Stadium.
Will Troy Dan say, "Oh no," from the?
Well, nobody from Nebraska said that. You know that.
I'm going to say
BC?
a loss. I'll say a loss.
Yeah.
This is a drag in the sleigh. This is like one of those games where, like, if it's going to be something different, if it's going to be something special, they'll go slay it. But I got to see it.
Yeah,
5-2.
I am 100% with you on that. If this is a good season, you go into Minnesota and you win that game. If this is similar to every other year, I kind of think it's going to be, you lose that game. All right, USC to finish out. No, excuse me, I got ahead of myself. Northwestern, they're heading to Northwestern. We're all 5-2. It's the last Saturday of October. And they're not heading there. They're at home. I got to learn how to read. Nebraska at home last Saturday of October against Northwestern. I'll learn the schedule. I got a few months. Calm down, folks.
I'll say a win.
Right.
I'll say a win. The over-under on Northwestern's 3.5 this year, which is usually when I guess they win like 9 games. But I'll say a Husker win.
So we should slot them in for the conference title game. Is that what you're telling me?
Possibly.
I've got that as a win. That's bowl eligibility by the time the calendar flips to November. If correct, yes.
Yep.
That would be nice to have.
Put me down for a win. Nebraska's 6-2. Now the Huskers host USC. They went out to USC last year. It was Dana Holgerson's first game, I believe, as the play caller. The Huskers get USC in Lincoln. Venue change doesn't matter. I'm taking the Trojans. Nebraska's 6-3.
Brunts is going back. He's waffling right now.
Yeah, this is my
waffle game.
Yeah. I'll go Nebraska in that one. But I reserve the right to waffle. That last year in LA, that felt like a game Nebraska should have had.
That seems like an apron that you have that says I reserve the right to waffle, and then it has like a
waffling.
Yep.
I reserve the right to waffle. Perfect.
Yeah.
That'd be a great apron.
Yeah. Somebody print it.
BC, did you say a win or a loss there?
I didn't say yet. I'll say a loss. Partly because I just want to work toward a certain record. But yeah, I agree with Brunts though. They should have had that game last year. Some tough red zone trips in the third quarter. Didn't intercept like 3 passes that should have been. I thought they got a couple bad calls in the red zone, if I'm honest. But I'll say a loss, 6-3.
So you're 6-3. I'm 6-3. What did you say, Brunts?
I said win in that one.
All right, Brunts 7-2.
Homer.
Nebraska, number 24 in the country, going to the Rose Bowl at 7-2, according to Michael Brunts, taking on UCLA. I'm going to go ahead and say a win here. Nebraska goes to 7-3. And the last time they were out in the Rose Bowl, the Bruins just threw swing passes to Jonathan Franklin all day. Nebraska's inside linebackers could not stay in coverage. It was a very easy game for Brett Hundley. BC.
I'm going to have some fun. This isn't fun to say what I'm going to say, but this is where I'm going to do a switcheroo. I'm going to say UCLA wins this game So this is like that stretch where it's like, people are getting frustrated with how it's going a little bit. They're 6-4, and I'm kind of setting up how I'm going to turn the page on the next one. But I'll say a loss at 6-4.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to my number. I'm going to say that Nebraska drops that one. I have a very specific number I'm trying to get to. So, still stuck at 7 wins. I think UCLA actually made some upgrades.
I think they're going to be a solid team.
So I will. They're still in LA, in case you didn't know.
That team looked good on the field too last year. Actually, when you got down close, I was like, okay, they got some 4-star dudes out there.
Some dudes. Yeah, so I'll say that's an L just to get to my number. The 2 LA games I reserve the right to waffle.
Okay. So Brunson's at 7-3. I'm at 7-3. BC's at 6-4, and you guys get to take your favorite trip on the slate. You get to go from the friendly, beautiful Los Angeles, Pasadena, whatever we're calling it, and you're going out to State College. Probably first to Pittsburgh, seeing the Franco statue, then driving over Nebraska at Penn State in November.
I'm going to wear my best Andrew McCutcheon jersey on the town that night before. So, as one does in Pittsburgh, but I think Nebraska loses that one. There's no press box there, no, right? Like, are we sitting outside for this thing? Where are they serving the potluck?
Yeah, I don't know. They do have like a church potluck in their press box that dates back to the Paterno years, and I'm not sure. Brunson's making reference to the fact we were in Pittsburgh last time, and we were in a decent enough restaurant, and there were people on dates, and they were all in Steelers jerseys on on a Friday night. So we have an inside joke about how guys take their best gal out on the town with like their Franco Harris, or I'm gonna put on the Bradshaw jersey for this one.
Guy had a Heinz Ward jersey on, trying to make time with a lady.
Yeah.
It's better Heinz Ward than like Plaxico Burress or George Pickens. I mean, there could have been worse. Heinz Ward's a perfectly acceptable player to wear a jersey of if you're going out on a date.
That tells a gal you really care about her in Pittsburgh. Like, this is getting serious.
It shows you how loyal you are. Like, he spent his entire career at Pittsburgh, right? So this guy's going to spend his it's a good symbol, I think.
He wants to set up.
He broke out the Jerome Bettis jersey. Oh my!
Yeah. I think you'd be a little more concerned if he shows up in a Roethlisberger, right?
Well, yes, for a number of reasons.
Probably not a great joke. I apologize for that. Let's just move on quickly.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So I have a loss at Penn State. I have a Penn State loss. Nebraska 7-4 with Iowa on the schedule. Brunts, what did you have?
Well, I had Penn State as a loss. Are we on to Iowa?
No, I
don't
have
think
a
we're
win.
on to Iowa yet. BC. I wanted to give BC the moment here. He was setting us up.
Oh. Yeah, it was obvious what I was going to do. I have a win. It's like calling your 12-5 game on the brackets. It's like there's going to be something that's not quite right. So UCLA, Penn State. I do think Nebraska's going to have a breakthrough moment. So whether it be Michigan or a game like this, I'll say it's right here.
Yep. And then they finish at home against, if TCF Bank or Minnesota or whatever that stadium is now is the House of Horrors. Whatever this series is against Iowa is the horror movie that comes out every year. Just it's like Saw 17 or whatever. That's Nebraska, Iowa. You know how it's going to end, and you watch it all the way through. And that's how it's going to go again. I have Nebraska at 7-5. Iowa wins to finish the regular season victorious on Nebraska's field. The Huskers 7-5 for me. BC.
I'll give Nebraska a win, and I think you kind of mentioned how there's a certain script to this game. I think to break through and just put a baseball bat to it, Nebraska needs to have one of those games where you handle your business and it's like you're up by 14 or something like that. So I'll give them
many opportunities to do exactly that.
It's a new year. It's new people. They're going to get this win. And 8-4 is a sweet spot to me. So that's what I was working toward. 7.5 is the over-under number right now for Nebraska. So it feels fair feels like the right pick for me. 8-4.
Brunts.
I'm also this 8 was my number. I had to get there. And I think Nebraska somehow finds a way to get it done against Iowa. I'm leaning a lot here on Wednesday, April 2nd, on Mike Eckler's impact on things. I think Nebraska finally is able to get that about even on special teams, which I think gets them over the top for a very narrow win. But an 8-4 season, that's probably that's destined for Florida, right? More than likely.
Maybe.
Tampa.
Depends on how the rest of the 18 teams or 17 teams in the conference do.
Little Tampa, maybe a little Nashville.
Yeah.
Get the Nashville trip that we should have gotten last year.
Nebraska's due for Tampa. It's never happened. It's got to at some point. I think this year.
All right. So so Brunts, do you want to take the Music City Bowl? Is that the one that you're going with here? And then BC's taking
I think Tampa's got its arms open for Nebraska and has for a long time. Maybe this is the year.
Got it. I don't know what bowl games Nebraska can get into at 7-5. They won't go back to the pinstripe. It seems like they're probably never playing in the one in Charlotte as long as Matt Rule's head coach. That's my takeaway there. So I'm gonna remove them from that consideration. I guess guaranteed rate. Maybe they're playing right after Christmas. It seems like they'd be a little bit of a letdown. Vegas? Could they go to Vegas?
No, not yet, because it's the
they're still locked into
Pac-12 another
teams,
year.
Yeah.
The Pac-12.
I think 7-5 has Nashville written all over it.
Yeah,
if they're that.
I think people would be excited about Nashville, less excited about 7-5. So, all right. So I have 7-5. Brunts 8-4. BC 8-4. This is our first iteration of running through the schedule. There will be waffling, so I am sure.
That's another good apron, by the way.
Apron.
There will be waffling.
There will be waffling. You just have Daniel Day-Lewis from There Will Be Blood just covered in waffle syrup or maple syrup.
Man, that's a great apron.
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it a lot.
Hey, here's a question for you guys. Since you brought it up, we didn't. You glossed over it. Do you remember the name of the kicker? The second string kicker that made a field goal against Maryland in 2019.
Oh,
18-yarder.
So Waldock took over the job, but this guy who I think was at Lincoln Lutheran, I think he's from Lincoln Lutheran.
Wow, look at you. You remember his name?
No, I'm blank. I want to say I have Chance in my head, but then I have Sinclair, and Chance Sinclair pitched for Nebraska. Is either of those right?
Chance Sinclair did not kick a field goal that day.
Well, no, I know that Chance Sinclair didn't pitch, but it was the last name Sinclair
on the travel roster.
Is it Jacob something?
No, it's Harrison something.
Okay, well, I don't know.
Harrison Martin.
Man.
Number 88 in your program.
Not even close.
Rings familiar now. Remember that was the game where Nebraska kept doing the pooch kickoffs and Maryland couldn't field them?
Yep.
There's a lot that happened in that game. I left at the end of the first quarter, left halfway through the first quarter, and made it back to the press box in time for the second quarter. And one of the stranger experiences I've had to have to take an Uber in the middle of a game. Garrett Nelson, I think, was blowing chunks after the game because he was sick and was playing. Dedrick Mills looked just like the sick emoji. And he ran for 84 yards. It was a weird. They played a ton of the whole bench played in that game. When Brunt said that Brian and I got in, I don't think he was too far off from where that thing landed. So
we'll have to do a pod on best Nebraska sick game performances, Jordan flu games, because that one's one. And then Missouri, the year in the rain on Thursday night, that team was under the weather and rallied in the fourth quarter.
Bryce nearly had one against Maryland this year. He played great while clearly under as well. So Nebraska wasn't able to win that game. Speaking of basketball, let's just throw in a crown prediction, as long as we're predicting right now. And BC and I will do a crown-related, Nebraska basketball-related podcast either later this week, or we'll see kind of how things play out. Nebraska has Georgetown, which they've never played in their program history, which kind of excites me in a weird way. because growing up, we're all relatively the same age. You guys would have a better experience with it than I would, but Georgetown was like a huge basketball name when I was a kid. Like Allen Iverson playing for Georgetown was a big deal. Their jerseys were a big deal. John Thompson was a big deal. But Georgetown seemed like a massive capital B basketball program. And it really hasn't been that for a while now. Ed Cooley is now the coach who's previously at Providence. I'm hoping for a Georgetown resurgence because I kind of like everything about the jerseys, the name Hoyas, the history with all the great players, all the, the 80s basketball games that I wasn't alive for, but I have watched because they'd be on ESPN Classic. I'm pro Georgetown, but I think Nebraska wins tonight against Georgetown. So your thoughts on Georgetown, your thoughts on this game?
Used to be able to get Georgetown gear at the J.C. Penney at Oakview Mall back in the day in Omaha.
They were that big of a deal, huh?
Omaha and Georgetown gear.
I think the only time I've ever seen Georgetown gear in the wild was at Stephen Barry's in like 2007.
Yeah.
Georgetown starter jackets from Georgetown were kind of a big deal. They were one of the top 10 sellers in starter jackets, it felt like.
Never got out of the metro. They weren't that wasn't one of the starter jackets you'd see in Columbus and western Nebraska, if you would.
I can see that.
I don't have a ton of thoughts tonight.
Not surprising, right? Yeah, that's not surprising.
I do think Nebraska finds a way to get it done and continues their stay in Vegas. I haven't really got into the matchup yet and really massaged it, so I'll defer to Brian.
I'm not going to be the a-hole now and say Georgetown. I'll say Nebraska wins. George, you're right though about the jerseys. The coolest thing growing up was that Georgetown wore the gray jerseys like at home, which was different. And when they busted out the specific jersey, everyone will picture the image when Iverson was there. That was just an awesome combination of like a player and jersey matching up perfectly together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Iverson, Georgetown. Iverson pre-76ers is a fascinating experience all to itself. If you really want to go down a rabbit hole today of various journalism. But yeah, Georgetown, Nebraska, the crown. It's been I guess, exciting tournament so far. There's been a couple close games. Nebraska looked like they were playing themselves to an immediate loss and managed to turn things around, go into a small lineup. We saw more Cale Jacobson than we had seen all year. And I thought, outside of fouling the shooter that one time, handled himself very well in that game. And he actually had some nice transition passes where he put the ball in the right spot for guys to be able to make easy moves around defenders to get layups and everything else. I kind of wonder if Cale Jacobson didn't earn himself a little bit more playing time now that Raleigh Wooster is unavailable. And Nebraska's lineups are largely going to be dependent on who is available for the other teams because there's definitely some people missing.
Cale Jacobson's going to be like the Husker head basketball coach in 2048. That's a big.
Is he still going to have the taped wrist?
Yeah, I don't know, maybe. But you have to admire that he was playing like point guard and also like guard in the 5 at times, and doing a decent job of it. So that was fun to see. I wish the kids could play. I wish they would let Frager and Janowski play in the tournament like this. That'd be fun. But you know what? I think people are semi into it. Like the readership numbers were pretty good for it, and I don't know. People are gonna track it tonight, I think.
The people I talked to about Nebraska basketball all watched it. I don't know. We're a diseased group of people that have spent a lot of time watching bad basketball. What's another game to us? That's sort of how I view it.
Have you guys heard? Is there any clarity on Georgetown? Speaking of sick players, like they had the health situation. Like, is that resolved? Like they were playing significantly shorthanded the other night against Wazoo. And are we assuming it was food poisoning? Like, is that what we're looking at?
I don't know if it was that or if it was Vegas related. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. Right.
I wasn't sure.
Ate the pizza.
Yeah, generally they had some guys unavailable. I don't want to. Yeah, I didn't know. That was it was a graphic they popped right up on the screen at the beginning, and then I did fall asleep in the second half, I have to admit.
Yeah.
I stayed up for the whole thing. It was easily one of the best finishes in Crown history. So it's got that going for itself. So if the tournament only lasts for 1 year, that would be one of the top games in Crown history for sure. So we will see how it goes. BC and I will have a full Nebraska, hoops cast here either later this week or early next week. There's definitely some things afoot in the transfer portal, so we have plenty to discuss. So we are going to do that another time. Appreciate everyone joining us here on the Husker247 podcast. As always, check out everything we have going on at Husker247. BC Brunts had coverage of yesterday's practice. There'll be more players, coaches talking on Thursday as spring football rolls around. Nebraska baseball had a good weekend, followed it up with a mind-numbingly stupid loss to Creighton in the midweek. So things are as usual for Nebraska baseball. Brunch, you got another podcast coming this week on Friday?
Yeah, we're cooking up a guest still, trying to get that marinated. But yeah, great series win over Oregon State, and spotting Creighton a 3-0 lead in the first inning before you have 2 outs. So never a good thing there.
I don't know that there's a single pitcher outside of Will Walsh that I trust at all involved with Nebraska right now, because it is, regardless of whether they're one of their stoppers in the pen or even a starter, it just feels like it's every inning has a high risk of a crooked number for Nebraska when they're on the mound. So tough way to win, especially when your offense isn't always cooking. But we'll see how things go for Nebraska baseball. Be sure to check out that podcast from Brunts later this week. Be sure to check out everything else at Husker247. For Michael Brunts, Brian Christopherson, Mike Shaver, we'll catch you next time.